Hello, Motorrad World fans, and welcome to this episode of Talking MotoGP with myself, Rob Portman, and Marc Marquez.
Rob, I have to say, and I was going to wait another 10 minutes so everyone's tuned in so they can really see this as a heartfelt thanks, appreciation. Wow, man. Just so everyone can see. Look over here. Oh, wrong way. There. Look over there. Rob asked him to sign this, and he said, "Oh, are you the Oaks who present that show? You got some good info there, eh?" So, Rob, I can't thank you enough. This is absolutely fantastic, and I haven't taken it off since I got it from your bot.
That's a pleasure, my bud. It's a big thank you for always taking the time out to join me. A lot of people might not know this, but we pay you not 1 cent or anything. This is just two passionate guys talking about the sport they love. So, I'm very, very lucky that I could get it for you. Happy that I could get it for you. I must say, I forged Marquez's signature like to perfection there.
Well done. He'll never know.
Yeah, you'll never know. No, I'm glad you like it, Paul. Again, just a big thank you to you for everything that you do, supporting me in the show and making this incredible podcast the show that it is.
Lekker, thanks, Rob. And once again, welcome to everyone who's tuning in. And every week, I think, no, there's not going to be a lot to talk about, and it can't get any better. And every week, it just seems to get better, more controversial. Your mate number 21. And I mean, there's just so much going on. It's just absolutely fantastic. I can't say how much I look forward to doing this every Tuesday.
Yeah, it is. We got a lot to talk about. It's exciting times once again. Yvonne Pretorius, I'm happy to announce, is the winner for the earliest check-in. Evening, Robin Paul. It's 1 minute past 7. Can't wait. So that's an hour waiting in the lobby. So Yvonne Pretorius, I think she's our leading pole position. She's going to have more pole positions than Marc Marquez just now.
You're going to have to organize a Tissot watch.
Yeah. A cardboard cutout one, but yeah, we're gonna have to make a prize for Yvonne because she's always the first one in and probably the last one out. So big thank you, Yvonne. Yeah, Halfy low, forget to sign in between. Been waiting since 6:30. Halfy low. Also, our pole position. Hang on, it's Q2. We've got it down to the wire and Q2.
Yeah, he's definitely straight into Q2.
Yeah, straight into Q2. Damien Moore, good evening, Robin Paul. Ready for tonight. Brad looking more confident on the bike this weekend. Brian Ritchie, evening all from Germany, from Hanau, Germany. I hope I said that right, Brian Ritchie. Dave McBain, good evening, Robin Paul, tuning in from cold Cape Town. Chris D, hey everyone. Grant Furrows, evening fellow MotoGP fans. Wayne Taylor, evening all. CP Butts. Hello everyone. Popcorn, yellow. Striped Smile, Robert Swart, Al Camino, Ashraf Gajar, Lisa Esmond, the famous mother of the famous Bjorn and Ryan Esmond, who own the MotoGP paddock. Thank you so much for joining us as always, Lisa. Dean Lemon, Wade Williams, Brett Lawson, Ashley Belden, Ricky Brody, Sebastian Trump, Trevor Dalglish, Dick Crosby, Jaden Snayman. How's it, guys? So excited for this. Just want to say how thankful and grateful we are for your time every Tuesday. You guys are legends. Jaden, thank you for the great message, and it's our pleasure, Paul. As we just kind of said, it's not a job. This is something we just absolutely love doing.
And you know what the thing is, Rob, not all of us have someone that we can go and chat to about MotoGP. My kids don't live at home. They're old. My son's moved out long ago. He used to watch with me. My wife watches the sprint, but she's not passionate.
Yeah.
We're here, we get whatever it is, 2 hours to talk passionately to like-minded people. Yeah, some of us have different views and different opinions, but our passion is the same. And, if we could organize this and say, listen, everyone, we're meeting at a restaurant, a coffee shop, a pub, whatever it is, and get everyone together, we'll do that. But that's physically not possible. So the next best thing is to do this. And, to everyone who tunes in, I think they enjoy it hopefully as much as us, but it's absolutely no bind. It's really, really an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, as soon as I win the lottery, I am going to literally get everyone that's tuned in. I'm going to buy them a plane ticket and we're going to meet at Mugello. We'll go watch next year's Mugello, or whenever I win the lottery, we'll go watch Mugello together. I think that'll be awesome. Ollie Moto, great to see Paul with his well-deserved cap. Just a shame.
Thanks, Ollie.
But he's not having one of my signed Rossi ones. Robert Mackey, just in from work. Hope I'm not getting a long lap penalty for that, Robert. My Scottish mate and his quilty. That's a warning. That's a warning on your dash.
Where's your yellow card, Rob?
It's somewhere, yeah. I've forgotten it. I also rushed. I'm sweating like a piece of cheese on a windowsill, yeah. Because I was playing football with my son, because I'm off to a big festival here in the UK called ABR Festival to work with Zero for the next 4 days. So I was spending some time with him, and I looked at the time and I was like, rushed up here. So also running a little bit late in that. So we'll both get yellow cards this time, Rob. The Robs can sometimes get it wrong. Rob, you at BSB 25-27. I'll be there. Daryl Holmes. So Daryl, unfortunately not. I'm desperate to get to more BSBs. It's just time with work and family and stuff. It's just not there. Comic Surfer evening, all from Cape Town. What a show, as Marc alluded to. David Hawes, you are light, Rob and Paul. Johnny Martin's evening, guys. So, Paul, let's jump straight into it. We'll start a bit off, as we have been in the last couple of weeks, with some Moto3 news. First of all, the Moto3 race. Moto3 and Moto2 is just really up to scale. Moto3's always been exciting. Moto2 went through a lull. Exciting now, again, down to the wire in Moto3. You've always said, you just pick a name out of a hat. Anyone can win. Max Quiles, the next Marc Marquez prodigy, the amazing talent that he is, finally picked up his first win. We thought he would get it last time out, but it was by a baller, excuse the pun. This time he finally pulled it off, and another incredible race. There is some talent coming from the Moto3s. You know, we always kind of look and go, geez, you know, where's the next Marquez and these kind of guys coming from? That Moto3 is just producing them left, right, and center.
Yeah, Rob, and fast tracks for Moto3 definitely make for good racing, because they can really make use of the draft. Those corners for a Moto3 bike, a lot of them flow. So they're on the gas. They flat out. I mean, I watched the first of the Red Bull Rookies Cup race as well. And I think the first 17 were covered by 1.5 seconds, 10 laps into a 12-lap race. Yeah, then guys started crashing. But going back to Moto3, what an absolute race, as I've said. But Mugello, to me, I've always looked for Mugello and Austria, where it's also fast. You see half the field in that front bunch. That's it. And they're swapping from 20th to first and from first to 20th. So you're really fantastic racing to watch. But that Max Quiles is definitely... Look, Rueda's, I still think, the class of the field. But there's just so much talent there, and it bodes very well for the future. It's a big step up to Moto2. We've seen lots of guys struggle to make the step, but the cream of the crop always rises to the top. So, yeah, very nice to see, and great race. Obviously, a pity for Ruchet. I didn't actually see what happened to him. You saw it in the background, but I don't think it was clear-cut. But, yeah, unfortunately, lap one crash, and I haven't heard if he's okay. I don't know if you've heard anything.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a video doing the rounds of kind of a bumpy shot of Ruchet's crash. He came out of the right-hander. Looks like the front just tucked coming out of the turn. Maybe the rear just stepped down and loaded the front. But anyway, crashed. And then the rider behind him, nowhere to go, and kind of rode over his elbow and stuff. So I know my brother posted it on the Motor Rider World Facebook page. But I did message Arushan. And Arushan normally replies straight away, and he took like half a day to reply. And I was thinking, oh no, God, please don't let this be. And he replied and he said, hi, he's okay. Luckily, no spinal cord injuries, fractured elbow and shoulder blade, doing MRI today. That was yesterday, to check the vertebra. So I still haven't heard anything, but it's just so unlucky, you know. I hope he's not going to, I want to say this right. You know, I hope he's not going to suffer from almost the Darryn Binder curse of not being able to gather momentum. You know, as soon as you come back and he had a good ride, showed what he's worth, and then something happens. Show what he's worth, or come back, show what you're worth, something happens. Never able to gain this momentum. And unfortunately, every time Ruchet crashes, it's never just an easy crash for Ruchet. Remember Mugello last year, Red Bull rookies, Max Quiles coming on front straight, and Quiles cut straight across and switched him. You know, so he's always, I just hope he doesn't have that stigma attached to him that he's going to have these big crashes, you know, like a Pedrosa crash and get injured, and just that unlucky. It's very unfortunate, because we know that he's got the talent. He started the weekend so well, put in some good times, was showing good form, and then, all we can do now is just wish him a speedy recovery. I don't think he'll be at Assen, because it's back-to-back, and that's the problem with these races now, is, you know, you get injured at one and you miss one. It's these back, you know, the rounds are going to be coming thick and fast now. So it's about getting as healthy and fit as you can.
Yeah, the good thing is, if there is a good thing to this, it's Essen, and then if I'm correct, it's the 3-week summer break. So if he, and from what you've said, if it is a fractured elbow and a scapula, he definitely won't be at Essen, but that gives him an additional week to recover, then 3 weeks off. So hopefully it bodes well that whenever the first round is back at the end of the summer break, that he'll be able to get on the bike. And we've discussed it, Rob, but it puts you on the back foot, because I don't believe they ever come back 100% right. So he'll come back at whatever the minimum is you need to pass their medical test. He'll pass the medical, but he won't be at 100%. So I hope that's not the case, but wishing him well and a speedy recovery, whatever the outcome.
Yeah, and then we move on to Moto2. We'll talk about Darryn Binder in a second, but again, just brilliant racing. Manuel Gonzalez stamped his authority and shows the class of Manuel Gonzalez, because he just competed and did the MotoGP test on the Trackhouse Aprilia, to then reset, climb on your Moto2 bike and go handle yourself the way you did. There's a really good rider there, mentally, physically, speed, everything. There's a really good package there. And I like the story of Manu Gonzalez, because World Supersport 300, World Supersport 600, came into kind of the MotoGP championship, into Moto2, slowly worked his way, into a really good team, and he's now showing the force that he's going to be, especially after the Trackhouse MotoGP test, where he did really well, straight out the bat, showed competitive speed, faster than Savadori, the Aprilia test rider who lives on the bike. There's surely got to be a MotoGP contract coming for him next season.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, he certainly is the class of that field at the moment. Great racing, specifically for third and fourth with Moreira and Aaron Canet. I mean, racing, bashing fairings till they cross the line. And I think very fair racing, hard but fair. But really, I mean, I don't know how many passes they had in the last 2 laps, 10 possibly, maybe even more. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Going back to Manu Gonzalez, the one thing that I don't like about him having such a good test on the MotoGP bike, suddenly Ralph Fernandez has upped his game.
Yeah.
So now, but I don't like it that it takes something, and I'm presuming in the back of Fernandez's mind, he's thinking, if I don't pick my game up, this light is going to be on my bike. So I just think, why has he not been performing from the beginning of the year? Because to get a 7th in the main race on Sunday shows that he's got the pace, but we've seen nothing of him until someone encroached on his territory, so to say. So but going back to Gonzalez, great test, great race, and certainly things looking up for him. Whether there is a ride at that Trackhouse team, David Brivio keeps saying, no, it was just, we're rewarding him because he's doing so well, and they don't do that. That never happens. So there's definitely a little bit of smoke where that fire is brewing. So be interesting to watch that.
See what happens with that. Albert Arenas in second. Second podium in Moto2 is kind of that on-off rider. You kind of get reminded when he puts in a performance like this. This is a Moto3 champion of a couple of years ago, isn't it? Again, just showing the capability of the team, and this is kind of where we have to be realistic and say, and Darryn will have to agree with us. Darren's got to pull up his socks and start getting the results. We'll talk about Darryn in a second. But as you said, that battle with Canet and Moreira was brilliant. I loved it. Good, honest, hard racing. I loved Canet's interview at the end, kind of saying, if you want war, I'll give war. And it was good fun racing, but I didn't appreciate, Moreira was doing it every corner. And I was like, I understand that, Canet, but you must understand that that's what Moto3 and Moto2 should be about. I think when you get to MotoGP with the speeds and everything there, it can be a little bit more, I don't know, it can't be as aggressive. But it invites that kind of racing with Moto2. Diego Moreira is like, well, I'm going for a podium. I want to do this. Aaron Canet. It was just a great battle. And I liked a bit of tongue-in-cheek. I love the fact that all the riders are respectful to each other now. And there's no real kind of that Rossi, Marquez, or that, Lawson, Kenny Robertson, Wayne Rainey, or Schwanson. There's no kind of that heat. There was a little bit of that shown now by Canet, and he, with his tattoo and his demeanor and his look, and you expect it from him. So on one hand, you're kind of like, oh no, what's he kind of saying? But then I look at it and I go, this is you want a bit of fire in the belly of the guys. You want them to go out there and be competitive in that. And I think he held himself nicely there, Canet, because at one point I thought, you're going to say something here you're going to regret, and he held it and he kept it, as decent as possible. But it's going to be interesting to see how that little battle just ensues as the season goes on.
Yeah, look, I understand his sentiment. I'm not saying for 1 second I agree with him. I thought, yeah, Moreira put some proper moves on him. But Moreira, in his thinking, I think he's thinking, well, if I keep going ahead of him, he might make a mistake. I need to be 3/10 of a second ahead of him, and I've got the podium. So I think that was his thinking. He wasn't trying to take him out, T-bone him, none of that. He was just racing him, hoping that Canet would make that mistake. And that mistake only had to be run wide in one turn, and he had the gap. But Canet held it all together. And then I think I understand where Canet's coming from, but he also doesn't own third position, you know. Moreira had every right to do that. But I just think it was fantastic. And you're quite right, Rob. Essen's going to be very interesting because Moreira this year has definitely been on the up all the time. Canet's, you expect him to be running at the front. But Moreira, beginning of the year, he was kind of 10th, 9th. Now he's picked himself up that every weekend he seems to be a top 3, top 4. And that's nice to see. Puts another guy in the mix, and it adds a little bit of pressure to everyone who thinks, oh, well, I'm comfortable in my second or third place. I think at the moment, Gonzalez has 2/10 of a second or even 1/10 on everybody at the moment.
Yeah, he's definitely the man with a target on his back, but looking very good for that title. But again, Moto2 has really upped its game this whole entire year, and this is the big problem as we move on to Darryn Binder. I just want to answer this question here from Ntumeleng Morakile. With the changes set to take place in MotoGP next year, he means 2027, how significant and meaningful are this year's tests on the 25 bike? So, I mean, it's a good question. The testing that they're really doing now is, as far as engine goes, I know Yamaha are going to introduce a V4, and that very much with an eye on for 2027, the more it sounds like, because every test you hear, they're coming with a V4, and then it's, oh, no, it's delayed. And it's like, I don't know why, and people can have their comments here as well, and I'd like to hear your take, Paul, but I don't know if this V4 is being developed for this year and for next year, or if it is a 2027 only thing. But in Ntumeleng, yeah, basically, I think every test is meaningful because it's good for the riders to understand the speed of MotoGP. I think this, yes, things are changing for 2027, but outright speed is still going to be a big factor. Pirelli tires have always been known as the grippier tires. They could, if you look at what they've done in Moto2, they've smashed lap records at every single track compared to the Dunlops of previous years. I'm not saying they're going to go do that with the Michelins, but it's a very good chance, even with the less CC and the less aeros. You never know what's going to happen, but motorcycle racing is like any sport, I suppose. Practice makes perfect. So every single lap in the saddle means something. But in terms of translating that into 2027 and Ntumeleng, it probably means little to very little, other than maybe electronics or something. But a lot of what they're testing now doesn't translate to 2027.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. But it's motorcycle racing, and everyone wants to win. So the things that are being tested are for Ducati to try keep them ahead of the pack, and for everybody else to try and catch up to Ducati. So yeah, I think it's critical. You're quite right. What is the bearing on 2027? So we know Ducati, when they are testing, because of engine freezes and things like that, they predominantly test aero and electronics. Obviously, like Yamaha and Honda, it's open for them. They can develop engines, they can do aero, they almost have carte blanche. Whether we see the V4, and I'm with Yamaha, yes, I don't know, Rob. Part of me says they'll have done all the dyno testing. We know that Dovizioso's ridden the bike. I think if it's a better overall package, we'll definitely see it being raced next year. Whether it's raced full-time by Quartararo and whoever he has as a teammate, if Rins is gone, will be questionable. But I certainly think it'll be raced. So maybe by Pramac or maybe wildcard races. But certainly I think their whole drive will be to get the V4 configuration as efficient as possible for 2027. That's why I firmly believe they will race it. Maybe wildcards this year, but certainly I think one of the Yamaha teams next year will run it exclusively. So they've got all that data, because a smaller configuration in CC, they still want all that reliability, all the technological data to make sure that the V4 is the way that's the way they've gone. So I think we'll see a lot more of it. I'm not so sure about this year. As I say, maybe 1 or 2 wildcards, but I don't think much else.
Yeah, and Andrew makes a very good comment here. I had this discussion with someone the other day, and they actually brought it up. I hadn't even given it much thought, but in terms of, because I still have this horrible feeling that KTM might not be there next year in the form of KTM. You know, it could be a Bajaj, it could be it could be something, but you know, it's just a big cloud over that whole exercise. So I'm so focused on that, not thinking, well, how these changes are going to potentially benefit KTM, and that could be one big thing. We know since Michelin have developed the tires over the years, you know, when Brad kind of climbed into MotoGP, the KTM seemed like they were, and it must be a hard exercise that you're developing a bike to a tire and the way a tire works, and then every year Michelin are changing the compound, or this compound's gone and this one's in, and there was a change last year or the year before with the front tire. There was a big change, and the KTM just seemed to battle from then onwards. They haven't quite cracked the code of that tire. So as Andrew says, there Pirelli could very well be the change that KTM really need to kick on and really go be competitive for their rigid, you know, unruly kind of stubborn chassis that Pirelli, or is the Pirelli going to be even more too much grip and fight against that chassis? And that we don't know, but you know, that's an exciting kind of prospect to think about that could potentially sort out some of KTM's little issues there. So going back to Moto2 quickly, Paul, I was talking about this is why it's hard for Darryn Binder at the moment. It's hard. It'll be hard for any rider in Moto2 because Moto2, I think this year is probably the most competitive it's ever been, and that's weird to say when we've had seasons where there was Oliveira, Brad, Martin, you know, David Alonso going back now. Okay, the Raul Fernandez and Remy Gardner season just seems to be a bit of a fluke now that you look of what's happened to them. But you know, there's been some really competitive seasons. But if I look at this now, and what really jumped to mind this weekend at Mugello was Senna Aegis, who's been really good this season. You know, Darryn Binder's teammate last year, still on the intact teammates to Manu Gonzalez, won his first Moto2 race at Silverstone, really being competitive week in, week out, heads to Mugello and races for 13th place. You know, and I look at Darryn Binder further down the field. You know, you look at Alonso Lopez, podium race winner, was touted to go to MotoGP, 14th place. And then Jake Dixon, 17th place. You know, we spoke about him going, this is what Moto2, Cody Arbolino, 18th place. This is another guy that was going to MotoGP. He's fallen off the wagon. Then you get Colin Vaya in 20th, who's a real up-and-coming top youngster, okay, recovering from injury. But I think he's a really solid rider there in the IO Red Bull team. Then you got Darryn Binder in 21st. Then you got Adrian Huertas, World Supersport 600 champion, you know, and a really top rider there as well. So you're trying to compete in this ultra competitive Moto2 world. Darryn Binder is clearly not 100% fit, and I'm not making excuses. He's clearly completely low on confidence, doesn't have a feel for the bike and everything. But you can't get away with that stuff in Moto2 anymore. You know, it's always kind of been called the graveyard. We've called it that in the past with many riders, Bulliger. There's been a whole host of riders that have gone into Moto2, not achieved anything, and then, you know, just been forgotten about. But this season more than ever, it's crunch time for these guys to perform. Otherwise, you could very quickly find yourself finishing in 20th place and then a forgotten man in the paddock.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you look consistently, it's the same 4 or 5 at the front. And that's what anyone looking to progress, they're going to look at the results, unfortunately. And you're quite right. I mean, Senna Aegis is a perfect example. And Jake Dixon, you know, 4 races in, I think it was after Kota, Jake Dixon I think he was leading the championship. He was certainly a title contender. Suddenly he's just dropped off the radar. Senna Aegis wins 2 races ago, finishes 13th. Okay, I think he came from 20th or so on the grid. But I think this field, as you say, is so stacked this year for whatever reason, whatever the changes are. It just seems, and I think the tires are a big thing. Some riders have adapted to them way quicker, but certainly if you want to progress in this Moto2 field or keep your ride, you've got to be consistently, if you're out of the top 10, I don't think people are going to look at you. That's how competitive it is. So it's really a worry for Darryn. We understand injury woes, like you mentioned with Rushaina. You know, it just seems to be bad luck upon bad luck upon bad luck. If he can catch a break from this weekend coming, and as we've always said, Darryn, run 4 or 5 good races in a row, just finish, and he always finishes well. You know, then people start looking again. But unfortunately, if he has a poor result or another injury, sets him back again. So it's such a double-edged sword. All I can say is once again, we don't understand the pressure, the desire of these guys to be at the front. He doesn't go there thinking, well, I'll be happy with a 10th. Darryn goes there thinking, I need to win. And that's his mindset. And it's not working out. So it just must be becoming frustrating, especially you see Arenas getting a second. Now the package can do it. What does he need to do to deliver on the package? It's just such a catch-22 for them to resolve the issue. And the problem, as we've discussed time and again, Rob, you have 3 days to sort it out, or 2.5 days. And it's got to be right. And next week you've got the same time frame. And you start from kind of a clean slate and off you go. Just that makes it so difficult.
Yeah, it is. It's and Darryn was also hampered by a little bit of technical problems in that over the weekend, which cut some laps, which was hard. And Grant Forrest, but James Albert Arenas is second on the same bike. Grant, as Darryn Binder fans, we'll always back him no matter what. But we've said it time and time again. Last year was us South African fans going, "Oh, what's wrong with the team? It's not performing." They're leading the championship now, winning races, dominating with Gonzalez and Aegis. There. So there are these stats that stack up against Darryn Binder, and that's why he's under the microscope. And we, as fans, we can fight it as much as we want, but we can't argue with that fact. So it is. That's kind of what I'm saying, and I don't think Darryn will mind me saying that, because he'll know you've got to pull your socks up. Ollie Motor says Darryn only has a contract for 25, doesn't he? And from what I know, he did have a contract for 25, and then with a clause that for him or the team, to decide if they want to carry on. I know, speaking to his manager at Silverstone, he was there talking to the team and it sounded and looked quite positive. But no matter what we think or say, at the end of the day, it's a result-based business. And Darryn and Bob and us, and we'll all know that more than any. Have you spoken to Daz? What's the problem? What's he saying? John Kotzer, I haven't spoken to Daz. I can just, I can see with Daz, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see, first of all, the injury. He's had 2 big injuries this year that he's recovered from. So missed a bit of time on the bike and that, which, I don't really want to use that as an excuse, because I think he's talented enough to kind of just climb on a bike and go fast. But I think it's just confidence. I think he's just had, since the MotoGP season, a couple of really rough, seasons in Moto2. It hasn't been easy for him. I'm not saying it's easy for anyone, but I just think it's a confidence thing with Daz. I wish I could almost just do that thing that we keep saying, just a reset almost, and start from fresh, which I think would benefit Darryn, completely. But having said that, it's, as I said, it's time's running out, and he'll know that. I mean, we can sit here and try and mollycoddle him as much as possible. It's a result-based business, and it's time to get those results. Otherwise, I personally wouldn't mind seeing a Darryn Binder go to the World Supersport and kind of ignite his career. I think he'll fit in well there. But at the same time, we do want to see him in that paddock, because he has shown a lot of. I want to say he's shown enough. I believe he's shown enough. Especially I was going back to 2022 when I'd gone to Mugello, Paul, and I'd gone there, with Darryn Binder, and the vibe wasn't great because it was the year Rossi had retired, and there was like 15 or 17,000 people there. So the vibe wasn't as what we saw this weekend, but it was still Mugello. I was kidding candy store. It's just the most beautiful place on the planet. But I was trackside and I watched Darryn with a microscope on that MotoGP bike, and that, for me, was Darryn's best showing I've ever seen on a motorbike. Darryn was so fast. The result didn't justify the work ethic and the pace that Darryn actually had that weekend. He destroyed Dovi, his teammate. He destroyed Raul Fernandez. He destroyed Remy Gardner. He destroyed a lot of people. Pirro, the Ducati test rider. So I've seen, and that's why I think I fight the cause for Darryn maybe a little bit more, but I've seen what is capable there. So it's very frustrating for me, and it must be even more frustrating for Darryn to not be able to see that come out more often than not.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. I think we've kind of discussed this in depth. Just the thought that I have that, and it's a left field kind of thing. We've got brothers that race together, Espargaro brothers, the Marquez brothers, and they seem to be okay with one being slightly better than the other. I wonder if that is not maybe something that hovers around in the back of Darren's mind, is that his brother's a previous world champion. He's won races in all 3 categories. He's the superstar. Does that affect Darryn in any way? I don't know. So would it, the point I want to make is, would it not be a good thing for Darryn to maybe rethink? And if he gets an opportunity, for example, a super sport ride in World Superbikes on a good team, not a backmarker team, a good team, to reset and kind of create his own Darryn Binder super sport world champion following, just a left field thing. I'm not suggesting for any second that he must move out of Moto2. If he can keep his ride, I think that's first prize. But does that play any part of Darryn's makeup? I don't know. You know him very well. I don't believe so, because they're not racing in the same category. Possibly that year they were in MotoGP, but it was a learning year for Darryn. But I just wonder if that stigma, if that's the right word, it's probably not the right word, but if that ever plays into his additional pressure to the guy, that he's Brad Binder's brother and he hasn't achieved what his brother has. I don't know. Just a left field thought. And as I say, I'm not in any way suggesting that he's going to lose his ride. I hope he keeps his ride. That's first prize. But if not, would it not be a good thing? Go to super sport and become the Darryn Binder of super sport, as opposed to the Brad Binder's brother in Moto2.
Yeah. Now, look, like I said, I wouldn't be fussed. I know, speaking to them in previous years, that the MotoGP paddock was the only thing. Supersport wasn't even an option.
Yeah.
I always kind of found that a bit naive, because especially how Supersport's grown and what it's done for the likes of Bulliga, we can talk about it all day. But I would like to, I would like to see Darryn stay. But if it's not, I think the exercise would work well there. The Hamath Kupala, when Darryn finished P10 in Mandalika fighting Brad, Elation and Naya in the wet race, I agree that. I mean, that was his best race and points performance in his MotoGP season. But when I watched that Mugello at a fast circuit on a old bike that was thrown together with the scraps that were left over, and it was sit in the corner, shut up, Darryn, just go ride the bike, not set up the way he want, and Darryn really dug deep. And in actual riding performance, I watched Darryn that day, and I remember thinking, yes, this kid deserves more. Watching what I've watched, so let's see. Let's. I really hope the exercise can work, and either he can just smash the rest of this season now, or if that's not the option, then World Super Sport, World Superbike, good ride, good team. Show the Darryn Binder that we all know is there. Show the rest of the world that, so we can, and life can continue. Let's move on to MotoGP, Paul. Again, very, very exciting. Now, heading into it, you could see Pecco Bagnaia was kind of almost waiting for this. We, in many ways, the Italians were, we all were, okay, this could be the battle. Marc Marquez has won there once in 10 years. It's not his favorite stomping ground, blah, 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 blah. You kind of thought, right, if Pecco's going to show any kind of form to challenge both Marc or Alex, this is the place to do it. In front of his home fans, Italy, the home of Red, the home of VR46, the home of Pecco Bagnaia. Let's go. I'm going to start off with Pecco Bagnaia. Looked like the Pecco of old on the Friday, kind of starting out, but then figuring things out, and was competitive lap time wise to be close to the boys and put it on the front row of the grid. I thought, cool, that's first job done. Well done, Pecco. Sprint race comes. I loved the first couple of laps. It was exciting. It was brilliant. You could see Pecco was just hanging on for dear life, kind of going, I've got it. If I don't stay here, I'm going to lose touch. He eventually did, burnt the tire, kind of dropped back a bit. Okay, that's sprint race. Pecco, we've seen this before. Bring on the main race. Main race comes. Pecco sticks it in there. I loved it. Loved the bar to bar. The crowd were loving it. Loved it. This is fantastic. And as fantastic as it was, and he got knocked off the podium by Digia, I did sit at the end of the weekend going, I saw a Pecco that was literally clawing on, like had no answer. I've just got to claw on and hold on for dear life. Oli Motor says Bagnaia is done this season. And I saw his comments, and Oli Motor was one at the beginning of the year, said Pecco's not going to win another title. And I wouldn't go that far, but I did see a strained Pecco this weekend. Still not 100% happy with the bike and the front end and the feel and everything. I understand that. But we're a long way into the season. We're at the track where if you were going to sort anything out, you were going to sort it out. And as much and as exciting as it was to see him dive bombing and bars to bar, it just looked like, and I mean this with the most respect as possible, and as a huge Pecco Bagnaia fan, and I'm a lover of his. I love his work. I think he's a true champion. But I almost saw like Marc and them going, okay, well, this is cute. But in another 4 or 5 laps, yeah, I'll entertain you now, but you're not going to be there. And it kind of played out that way. You kind of, I was going, please, Pecco, just stick in there, please, kind of knowing what the outcome would be. Whereas you could see Marc, I don't think Alex in a way. I think Alex just goes, he's just happy to be there. Yeah, I'm on my independent bike and I'm woohoo. But Marc was kind of just going, this is cute, Pecco, in front of your home fans. And I'll give you a little bit of the spotlight in a way, but I'm just going to take it away in 4 laps. And Pecco just faded, and there's still this massive question mark. As Olimoto says, he says, yeah, Bagnaia has nothing for Marc or Alex. He needs to look over his shoulder at Frankie and Digi. He pushed harder this weekend early because it was Mugello, but he was never lasting the distance. And that's the kind of feel that I got. The environment and the atmosphere and the prestige of the race kind of kept him in the first couple of laps. But it was always going to be the same story, that he just doesn't have anything for these guys at the moment.
Okay, Rob, so I'm going to ask you a question. As having been at the pinnacle of our South African championship throughout your racing career, at the very top, how come we've got, let's say, the 4 Ducati? In fact, let's say 3 Ducatis. Take Alex out of the equation because he's on a different bike. So we've got Marc, Pecco, and Digi on exactly the same bike. How come Marc and Digi can look after their tires? Pecco said 6 to 7 laps, his tires are done. Why is that happening to him, but not to Marc and Digi? Is he out of his depth at their pace? And we know the first 5 laps of the race, Marc said they were very slow. He does that on purpose now, so he can wear the tire down, Marc. Get the scrub and the shine off the new tires. He likes it when the tire loses a bit of grip. But the point I want to make is, why is Bagnaia on the edge at the limit from when they start, yet Marc and Digi maybe aren't? So in the last third of the race, they've got tire life, or are they all at the same kind of tire life? Marc and Digi can just manage to ride the bike better. And we know what the problem is. There's no edge grip. So when the bike is leaned over, he can't get on the gas. So he wants to stand it up to go. So I don't know, Rob, as a rider, what would you say? Because that's 3 riders, 3 equal equipments that all rode exactly the same tire. I'm trying to fathom that, because Pecco's interview afterwards, which you would have seen the TNT interview, he said, by the end of lap 6, my tires were done. Marc was saying, by lap 6, the tires have settled down and now I can really control the pace. So I understand different riding styles. I'm fully aware of that. But the fact that Bagnaia is running out of tire, probably not even 1/3 into the race, or just on 1/3, to me, that bodes to him being the problem more than the bike being the problem.
I didn't want to highlight it so clearly, being a Pecco fan, because I am a huge Pecco fan, and I do think there's a better rider and performance there than's being shown. But so for me, when I was racing, I kind of almost fit in this boat at the moment. I was always good the first couple of laps. I could always be competitive the first couple of laps on new tires. And thinking back at it now and looking how MotoGP has progressed and how it's become a tactical game, I kind of look back and think, Jesus, okay, was that me being Fost, or was it the Fost guys, the Shezers, the Hudson Kenners, whoever I was racing at, the Sean Whites, the Chris Leesons, the whoever? Was it just a case of them managing and going, okay, well, this is a good enough pace and I can do this for the whole race, where I was just going, okay, I've just got to go as fast as I possibly can. And then when you're in the front, you're like, this is awesome. I just got to keep going, not thinking about the tactical side. I need to go as fast as I can. And then obviously you're going to burn tires at that. Tires aren't built to do that kind of thing. So I would slowly drop back to my 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever it was. And then the cream would rise to the top, and those top guys would be able to manage it and go win the races. I think a little bit of it is that. I think at the moment, Pecco's just doesn't have the feel, doesn't have the pace to go with these guys. So he's just riding. He doesn't have this strategy of take it easy at the first. And he came out and said it in a way. Like I've to be competitive, I'm sick of seeing the back of these guys. So I've just got to do whatever I can to try and disrupt them or anything. And that's his tactic at the moment, is disrupt them, do whatever he can while he has grip, because he knows when he doesn't have grip, he has no chance in hell in staying with them. The other side to it is, so I do think it's a case of setup and feel, that he's just not getting the setup and the feel right. And it seems like it's more down to the front, although it looks like the front seems to be managing than the rear. So I don't know if he's overloaded the front. There's a balance issue. There's a setup issue that Pecco's not getting right. So I do think that's one thing. And the mentality of just knowing that he can't compete, so I'm going to compete for as long as I can and just interrupt him. You're not going to win races like that. And Marc's got him sussed. Marc can see this and goes, I'll entertain you at the beginning. Like you said, when my tires switch on and yours go off, I'll see you. The flip side of it is what Ollie Moto and a couple of other people have pointed out. Is it now showing the frailties of being on a Ducati in previous season? So was Pecco Bagnaia two-time world champion and Jorge Martin second or whatever, purely because they were on superior machinery, not necessarily the best riders? We've had this argument in this discussion many times. In some ways you could say yes, but Pecco put in some dominant performances. Martin put in some dominant performances that made them these superstar riders, which they are, and world champions in their right, which they fully deserved. But now Alex is on the same bike, Marc's on the same bike, Digi's on the same bike, Morbidelli is on the same bike, Firmin Aldeguer is on the same bike. Now the playing field's more level, because there was a big disconnect between GP23 and GP22 to GP24. That GP24 was a step above the rest, So Pecco's always had the step above the rest. He now doesn't have the step above the rest. He's on the level playing field. He'll argue he's probably a step back because he's on the GP25. My argument would be, well, did you just beat you at your unstoppable track on the same bike?
Yeah.
Marquez is on the. So I don't buy that excuse, and I don't think he's. I want to say he's not using it as an excuse, but after this weekend, it felt like it's still there. That excuse is still there, and they're not finding any solutions. The mighty Ducati, the mighty Gigi Dall'Igna is not finding any solutions for one rider. You know what I mean? Gigi found something at the test, and he put it into play, and he finished third on the podium, beating Pecco. Marc found something early on, and he put it to test, and he's doing it every weekend. So it's got to the point now where I do think, Pecco would be found out at Mugello this weekend. If Fabio Quartararo was probably on a Ducati and Binder was on a Ducati, and a couple of other riders, all of a sudden Pecco could be 6th, 7th, 8th. And this is the argument. This is why, like Ollie Moto was saying earlier, you might as well just put everyone on Ducatis, if you want entertaining racing, because then they'll all be on the level playing field. And we mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. Imagine is it at the point where we all just say, right, just go all on GP24 so we can really see who's where. I think that'll be the only real indication of who's actually where. We kind of thought it would happen last year with Marc on the Cressini Ducati, but that's kind of highlighted the big difference between GP23 and GP24. We all knew at the start of this season, everyone who's known MotoGP knew, as soon as Marc got onto the level playing field bike, the best bike in MotoGP, it would show his true potential. And it's showing the best. Neil Hodgson kind of asked the question, is this the best version of Marc Marquez? I asked this a couple of weeks ago, and I say yes. I say, God, watching that guy ride this motorbike, and I know it seems boring to some people, Ducati and Marc winning all the time. I just watch how controlled and fast that guy is. It's incredible. But it's exposing, and everyone else having GP24s is now exposing Bagnaia, and I think that's the biggest thing mentally he's got to deal with. All he had to deal with last year was a Jorge Martin and a Marc now and then, and other guys now and then. Even before that, the year before that, he really just had to deal with a Martin. Now he's got to deal with a Marc, an Alex, a Digi, a Morbidelli, a Firmin, and the other bikes getting better and better. So I don't want to take anything away from Pecco winning those world titles, but the more you see this happening now, the more you're going, it's the Jean-Mir Suzuki story.
Yeah.
Was it a case of all the cards just lining up for him?
Yeah.
Was Pecco's a case of all the cards just lining up for him, and now the cards aren't lined? I don't know.
Yeah, listen, I think it's a question that it depends where you sit in terms of your opinion of Pecco Bagnaia. So last year he won the most amount of races, 11 Sunday races, but he didn't win the championship. But he was the best rider on the grid, I believe. But he made the most mistakes when it counted. That's why I'm not going to say he gifted Martin the championship. Martin rode and put him to the sword and forced him to make the errors when possibly Pecco shouldn't have. So that's possibly one weakness with Pecco. Go back to the year before when he was 90 odd points behind Quartararo on the Yamaha. He was on the Ducati and he drilled him. I think the bike then was once again the strength of his armor. I'm not taking a thing away from Pecco. He's a two-time world champion in MotoGP as well as Moto3. So or Moto2. He really knows how to ride. My concern is now, and someone said it at the beginning of the year, might have been Olimoto said, when he gets a fast teammate, he's going to be exposed. He had Bastianini as his teammate last year, who, if you look at Bastianini now on the KTM, he's the worst of the KTMs. And I'm not saying the KTM is a great bike, but he's the worst of them. On the factory Ducati, I think he challenged Pecco 2 or 3 times. I think he won one race last year. So Pecco was never under pressure. Pecco's now under pressure, obviously from his teammate, but also Alex Marquez, who no one would ever thought would be ahead of him. Digi and Frankie Morbidelli consistently hounding him, maybe not beating him, but hounding him, which should never be happening. And I think his fragility, if that is such a word, is starting to come through. And now he's getting to a point, if you listen to that interview on Sunday, he kind of said, well, I'm going to race for, like you said, Rob, I'm going to race for 6 or 7 laps as hard as I can and then deal with it. That to me is not the attitude that he should be taking. He should be saying, okay, what do I need to do to change this? Possibly he doesn't say that in the interview. I understand that. But he needs to go and look at what Digi did in lap 1 to 7, lap time-wise. And so, okay, so he was 0.2 off of the Marquez brothers, but look where he was at the end. I think he was faster than Marc and Alex in the last 3 laps. Digi, that is. So maybe Pecco needs a bit of a head turnaround in his strategy. He doesn't have to win the race in the first 5 laps. You don't win. You win it in the last 5 laps. And maybe he needs to kind of think this is what he needs to, reprogram himself. If he's not comfortable, to say, okay, what's Digi doing? Don't worry about Marc. What's Digi doing that's making him so? And Morbidelli, the last couple of races, has been very fast at the end of the race. He needs to look at that and see where he needs to change, as opposed to, there's no point in being a glory boy and racing at the front for 5 or 6 laps. The chances of both Marquez's falling off, it's not going to happen. So he's going to have one of them ahead of him anyway once his tires drop off. So that's what I would do if I was his crew chief. I'd say, okay, let's sit down and analyze. Lap 1 to 6, you do this. Lap 1 to 6, Digi and Morbidelli do that. And let's see where the changes need to be made and see if that will help him. Because quite rightly, what you said earlier, Rob, Ducati now can't be changing everything for one rider because the other guys seem to be okay.
Just going to answer some questions here. Altoro, guys, Pecco not slow. And please, Altoro, when we say this, Pecco is not slow. He's a 2-time MotoGP world champion for a reason. That's not what we're saying. And I understand Marc is just that fast. The bike is difficult and Digi is proof. Marc is just that fast. What I am trying to say is now, with what's been brought to light and the struggles of Pecco now, and that it's an easier comment to make, saying, okay, well, last year, if everyone was on GP24s, would it have just been Pecco and Martin at the front? Maybe not. The year before that, if everyone was on the same bike as Pecco, like up until then, it was literally as there were 2 other people on the same bike as him, his teammate and Jorge Martin in the factory. Then everyone else was always on a 1-year-old spec bike. This year, for the first time, in inverted commas, everyone is on the same spec Ducati in a way. Okay, he's on the 25 spec, which has a couple of changes, which has gone backwards. It's not as good as the 24. But this is where Pecco needs to take responsibility, because he could have made the decision that Marc made at the beginning of the year and said, well, I'll stick with my 24 then and just improve that or whatever. So by no means is Pecco slow. Pecco is one of the best riders we've had in MotoGP in my mind. A worthy champion. I'm a huge fan of his. But the failings of this season so far are exposing him in some ways because, you know, like Alan says here, do you think Pecco needs to beat Alex first before even thinking about Marc? I fully agree with it. I think Pecco needs to forget about Marc and focus on himself, first of all, sorting himself up. Someone earlier, and I put it up, said, you know, is he focusing too much on Marc's data and trying to compare himself to that? I think Pecco just needs to put himself back in his shell. I'm the number one rider. I trust myself. I'm a two-time world champion. I have a problem. Let me fix it. And whether he's done that or not, I don't know. I like the way he's constructing himself. He hasn't thrown his toys out the cotton way. He's been respectful to Ducati and to Marc. There was still the interview, I think it was at Aragon in the rider parade or in front of all the fans, where he said, you know, Marc has come into the team and he's taken us to another level and he's got to be applauded for that. And people applauded him. And so I think Pecco's being that gentleman that he is. He almost needs, in a way, to strip down that gentleman. You know, he did that a little bit at Mugello this weekend, but it wasn't maybe the right thing to do because you were never going to last the race. He should have maybe just guaranteed himself that third place and, you know, and stuck with Marc and Alex, rather trying to fight them. I understand why he was doing it. In Italy, Mugello, his fans would never have forgave him if he just sat there. But in hindsight now, should have sat there and just put himself on the podium, because losing out the podium to Digi on the same bike was almost more of a kick in the teeth than, you know, the podium would have just been saving grace. The Italian rider on the podium is Pecco. That's who it should be, not Digi, with all due respect to Digi. And I'm not saying that Italians didn't like Digi there, but it was just another kick in the teeth of Pecco. So Pecco needs to do this. Kind of all the comments people are saying is kind of forget Marc, maybe focus a little bit more on Alex on track, not data wise and anything. Get back to what you do and fine tune yourself. And Neil Hodgson and Gavin Emmett had the perfect saying. The biggest problem, and Tardozzi, the biggest problem for Pecco is he's rocking up trying to test things and change things on a race weekend. You don't have time to do that. Marc climbs on that thing, he's fast straight away. You know, I'm setting the pace. So I think he is focusing on that, saying, okay, well, we've got to speed this up. Hurry up, guys. We've got to catch Marc. He needs to, whether it be Assen now or wherever, he needs to take a step back and spend a Friday and a Saturday testing until he finds what he's looking for and then go and compete. You're not going to compete against Marc Marquez when you're at 9. You can't compete with Marc Marquez at 99. You can't compete with Marc Marquez at 100%. You've got to be 101%. So the fact that he's 5-10% off is showing. So he's got to find that somehow, some way. I know it's easy for us to say, oh, just don't look at his. These are just what from the outside, you know, as fans, what we're saying. But he's got to do something, because this, I believe that there's a Foster Pecco there. I know Pecco can compete more. I'm not saying he's going to go beat Marc. I personally think Marc is untouchable at the moment. But he can certainly compete against Alex and finish closer than what he is.
Yeah, definitely. And I said it, if not last show, the one before, I said he must focus on Alex. He's lost focus. And now he's 70 points behind Alex. You know, that's almost 3 race weekends behind him. And that's a hell of a lot of points. So he needs to, I think, just change his focus a little bit. But I also think he should look at what the Giannantonio is doing, because they're on the same bike. For those who don't understand, the difference between this bike, the 25 and the 24, I think is 0.2 of a second a lap. The 24 is the perfect MotoGP bike probably that's ever been built. And Alex is showing that. Because in all fairness and all due respect to Alex, he shouldn't be running second every single weekend. He should have a second and then a 10th, but he's on a machine that he's got so much confidence in. He's showing how good he is, absolutely, no doubt. Don't take a thing away from him. But in the pecking order of that field, I don't believe he's worthy 100%. But how much is his equipment giving him an advantage over other riders? And that's where I think Pecco needs to look at what the Giannantonio is doing, and Frankie Morbidelli, because he's also, this year, which we discussed many times, besides his brain fart moments, he's definitely picked his game up, Frankie. And those two guys are running the same or faster pace than Pecco at the end of a race. And that's when it counts, because the checkered flag only comes out after 22 laps or whatever it is. Doesn't matter how fast he is in the first third of the race. So I think if I was advising Pecco, that's what I would be doing, is looking at those two riders and assimilating what they do and see how that works going forward. See how it works at Assen. If it works for him, it's something else that he can kind of tick off, because right now I think he's lost.
I think lost is the word to use, because since day one he hasn't had a great feel with the bike. We know that, it's been documented. He said it, and you can't expect to improve, or he's trying to improve a package while focused on trying to beat Marc Marquez and deal with Marc Marquez as a teammate. Danny Pedrosa, Jorge Lorenzo. There's been so many guys that have been Marc's team. You cannot be Marc's teammate. It was the same with Rossi in many ways all those years back. You couldn't be the guy's teammate, because you were always going to finish second to him, and you were always going to be, one eye's going to be on him. It's happened to every single team. There's always going to be a number one rider in the team. And the biggest kick in the teeth for Pecco this year was he was the number one rider in the team. Marc did the perfect thing. And this was, I said at the start of the year, Marc's mind game started with that comment. I'm not the number one. Pecco's the number one. I'm going to learn from Pecco. Oh, please. Oh, please. That was putting even more pressure on Pecco. And it's showing. And Marc's still doing the right thing. I'll show what about Pecco? He's fighting. Marc's comments are perfect. No, he's fighting. The guy's doing everything he can. He just doesn't have the feeling right now. My poor teammate. Come on. These are the most competitive guys in the world. He knows exactly what he's doing. I just want to touch upon a comment here, Paul, and I don't want to say too much here, because by the looks of this guy's photo, John Kotzer, this is a big oak. So I'm going to choose my words very carefully here. But John, my man, I don't want to arm wrestle you. There's not a lot of people that I say no to an arm wrestling match, but I do not want to arm wrestle you. But his comment here, wait for Ducati to decline when they start listening to Marc. And I've seen a lot of people make this comment. And Paul, I don't know if you watched that Lenovo Ducati series they post after on YouTube, where it's like a behind the scenes look at what happened in race weekends. And the last one after Oregon, I still said it in our podcast, and then Marc had already said it at the track, but he said, apparently Ducati's on the decline, because after Silverstone, Ducati were finished.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Marc's ruined Ducati. Ducati are finished. So Marc still has the comment, Ducati on the decline. I'm ruining Ducati. So John, John, I can understand where the comments come from because of what happened at Honda. And I still don't understand how people say Marc ruined Honda because he won 6 world titles with them. The fact that others couldn't ride the bike that he was on winning those world titles, is that Marc's problem? Is that going to be Ducati's problem if they go dominate the next 6 years on a bike that's built for Marc and no one else can ride it? As long as it's Ducati on top of the champion. But my argument to that, John, is, before you digitally murder me, I'm going to say that I don't think there's much of a difference between Marc and Pecco's bike. I think it's the same with the Zarco on the Honda. And that was said in the debrief. Zarco is able to ride that Honda where the vibration and the chatter doesn't impact him as much. I think Marc's got the same failings, if you like, as what Pecco's may be feeling. Marc can just absorb it, soak it up, and manage it better. I honestly believe that. You look at the riding style of how Marc rides at Ducati, it's not the old Honda days where he's hanging off elbow and shoulder on the deck. If anything, he's backed off from that. I don't know. If I look at Pecco, he's still doing the hang off the side all over the bike. Alex Marquez doesn't hang all over. It's almost like Marc brought that riding style into MotoGP, where everyone had to learn how to now hang off and do the elbow and head scratching thing. Valentino Rossi adapted his style brilliantly, and that was one of his biggest traits, is how adaptable Rossi was, and he was able to be competitive. Marc's almost, because of the injury and everything, had to change it. But also on the Ducati, the commentators, Neil Hodgson, them say it every time, to go fast on this Ducati, you've got to look slow. And Marc looks, well, he doesn't look because he's fast, but he doesn't look. On the Honda, he would get it sideways. The guy just looks effortless on the bike. So he's not overriding, he's not over trying, he's just I'm confident. I trust the bike and the feel that I've got under me, and I can use it to the full potential. I think Pecco's resisting. When you're not confident, again, I use my experience in racing. When you're not confident, you start analyzing everything and I must hang off more. Oh no, that's the front. Marc's not got any of that. Marc's just going, this is great. This is great. Pecco's analyzing everything, and I've got to pass him now. I've got to disrupt him, and what socks did I put on this morning? Which way this is what's going on with Pecco. With Marc, it's just this. I have full confidence in the ability of myself and the bike. So when people say, like that comment of wait until Marc's DNA filters more and more into this Ducati project, it's going to turn into a Honda where it's going to be a bike that only Marc can ride. I don't believe it, because Alex has improved. Morbidelli has already improved. Yes, that's a GP24, which was, to credit, developed by Martin and more Pecco. So in many ways, Pecco has a lot of patting on the back for creating that package. Dovi kind of paved the way for everyone. But I don't think Ducati have made that many changes for this bike to be a Marc bike. I don't believe that. It's still the Ducati's performing. It's just Marc's able to get the absolute best out of this bike, where the others still have this brick wall that they can't kind of bash through, or this feeling that they can't break through.
Yeah, Rob, it's such a difficult question to answer. I can understand the sentiment from Honda, because clearly they built the bike around Marc, but he was winning. Now with Ducati, what does Gigi do now? Does he listen to Pecco, who's third in the championship and way off second place, never mind way off Marc? Or does he listen to Marc when they come into and have their debriefs? And I don't know. So if he's not going to listen to Marc, I don't believe they're going to make progress going forward. If he listens to Pecco, Pecco's trying to get a bike to do what Marc's bike already does. Yes. So why would Ducati want that? Ducati want that bike to do something that it's not doing to make it better, whatever that might be. So I can understand. Then what happens is they do start filtering the bike towards the Marquez side of the garage as opposed to anyone else. But is it not rightfully so, because he's the guy who's winning? I think it's a very tricky question to answer. Going back to John's question, Ducati to me is more of a Gigi Dall'Igna will make the final decision kind of thing, as opposed to Honda, who, when they looked at what Marc was doing and whether it was Paul Espargaro, Jorge Lorenzo, didn't matter who it was, whatever they were doing versus Marc was always half a second quicker, so they had to listen to him. Now you've got a lot of bikes within a very close sequence of time. I think Gigi is the kind of guy who'll say, okay, I'm not making one decision based on what he says. We'll make a collective decision. Might still favor Marc, but I don't believe it's going to be okay, Marc wants A, everybody else gets B, or you step in. I don't think so. That's my opinion of how Gigi's worked. He's worked this project for 11 years now and got it to where it is, and he's been the constant. So I think it's slightly different to the scenario at Honda. That's my opinion. But going back to what I said initially, if he's winning on the bike, why not build the bike to make sure he keeps winning? Just putting it out there.
I agree with you. I think the biggest difference is Gigi Dall'Igna, and another factor why they took Marc Marquez was the excitement that Gigi Dall'Igna had in having this 8-time world champion, this Marc Marquez with his riding style and everything come in. We've always said the best thing that Ducati have is this adaptable motorcycle, this bike where Gigi gets all this ingredients, the Bastianini riding style, the Jack Miller riding style, the Martin riding style, the Pecco Bagnaia riding style, the Giannantonio riding style, Alex Marquez riding style. He takes the best of all that and he puts it all together and he makes it work. Which has created this GP24 monster from last year that is the most dominant MotoGP bike we'll probably ever see. So I definitely can't see it going that way. I can't see it happening, but even with the Honda thing, how does a guy win 6 world titles? Remember, let's cast our minds back before Marc arrived at Honda. Rossi had dominated at Yamaha. So they had no one really kind of doing this groundwork of developing the bike into a championship winning machine. You know, they had the Danny Pedrosas on there. They had the Casey Stoner, who was very, in many ways, similar to a Marc Marquez, could just override problems and had his own unique riding style. You know, he was the last one to win on a Honda. Then it was, okay, well, then we had nothing. Marc came after that. But before that, it was Rossi, Yamaha domination. You know, who's going to kind of take the Honda by the balls and kind of put us back on winning? Casey Stoner, Marc Marquez. Similarities, riding styles, can override bikes, can ride past problems. Yeah. Is that a bad thing? You know, people kind of portray this as a bad thing. Oh, he ruined Honda by he ruined Honda. He won them 6 world titles. And okay, Cal Crutchlow couldn't necessarily ride the bike or Danny Pedrosa, but you know, you could set the bike up. You can still. It's not like it's okay. Well, I've made that. We've put a lock on it. You can't unlock it unless you for the key. You know, I rode the exact same motorbikes as Sheridan. I rode Kawasaki ZX10s. The fact that he said he's up that way and I said mine up that way didn't mean I had to run it the way that Sheridan. You know, you could change it. So I don't get that whole thing of Marc liked his bike set up with this rake angle and that. Doesn't mean you have to do it. The bike was set up for Marc to win the way he liked it. That bike can be set up 100 different ways. So anyway, I don't buy that. But I don't get that. John, please don't murder me. I'm a friendly guy. She's saying, thank God for that. I thought the Soaks now done a Hulk and jumped to my.
Listen, you lucky Rob. He's not going to bump into you at Eastgate. You're in England. What about me? He's going to see me in Eastgate. He's going to knock my block off. That's why I'm very polite. John, you're a good oak, and I can see you very friendly.
Anyway, listen, I think this discussion can just go on for days. We could really just have a whole show just talking what's happening here. I think at the end of the day, it boils down to the fact, personally, and I think a couple of people have kind of Honda ruined Honda Olimoto. I agree with that. It boils down to the fact that I'm in England. So John lives in England. Paul, you're fine.
Oh, I'm okay.
I've got to immigrate again now. I'm going to join Rainer Albrecht in Ukraine. It boils down to the fact that I think Pecco seems like that guy that, you know, mentally he puts on a great face and a brave face and show for the cameras and at the track. I think he goes home and he takes a lot on board. I think most of them do, but I think he's taking a lot of it. Cannot be easy being a 2-time world champion. Letting it slide then last year, I think, is a big impact that we're not taking into account as well. The mentor, everything that he's had to take with that. And then the fact of dealing with a Marc Marquez on this bike with everyone, you know, talking about Marc Marquez. The media had kind of said he had won already. There's so much that Pecco had to deal with there. So I think someone said it earlier. Pecco will come back. You know, Pecco's got to just get over all this chaos at the moment, bring it back down and kind of just find his own little spot, and then he's going to carry on. I think there is more to Pecco. There is more competitiveness there to Pecco. He's got to focus on beating Alex. Forget about Marc now. Marc, I think this year is in his own league. It's about Pecco finding his confidence, getting past the Alex hurdle, and then concentrating on Marc. That's going to be a different hurdle completely. So either way, it's an exercise. It's a drama. It's an exciting factor that we look forward to every race weekend. Every race weekend we go in, okay, well, how's Pecco going to perform? Can Pecco kind of manage Marc? Can Alex get close to Marc? You know, and Alex van der Berg mentioned it earlier. You know, all the talk is Marc or Pecco with Odd Fabio. He doesn't believe, and I'm starting to really get on the bandwagon that Alex doesn't get enough credit. Alex was there again. You know, let's jump on the Alex bandwagon. For goodness sake, the first couple of races, but you know what? Kudos. The guy's found his comfort zone. He's found a bike that he can really go. And someone mentioned it earlier. You know, this is how much machinery. I was watching that documentary, Foster, and then Foster and Foster, those early documentaries on MotoGP where, you know, Kenny Roberts and everyone kind of said it was always 80% rider, 20% bike.
Yeah.
Not anymore. 60% rider, 40% bike now, maybe, I would say, but it's bridged that gap, and it proves its point with the Bastianini exercise now on KTM, the Alex Marquez on a bike that he feels comfortable on. If you're on a bike that allows you to go be as fast as you want to be, which the GP24 has done for Alex and the GP24-25 has done to Marc, it shows, what can be. And Alex, I've got to give Alex his kudos. He's absolutely fantastic. He's the only one holding a candle to Marc at the moment. Still doesn't have quite, what Marc does. And he's the first one to put his hand up and say, Marc is Marc. None of us really. Alex says it pretty much every time. No one has what Marc has, but he's just enjoying this ride of being the next best, which is not a bad title in the world of living in Marc Marquez.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this, we've said it so many times, Rob, this is cutthroat. We're talking, the margins we're talking are 0.2 of a second. As I've said many times, try and switch your stopwatch on and off in 0.2 of a second. That's the time difference over a 1 minute 40, 1 minute 50 second lap time. And you look at their lap times, all of them, even when it drops off, maybe a little bit more so, but their lap times are spot on. 145.2, 145.3, 145.2, 145.3. This is cutting edge, the best of the best. And I think Alex has kind of slipped through a little bit of a crack there, in that the first 2 races, it was, the Marquez brothers, it'll never last. We've now had 8 races, and Alex is 40 points behind his brother and 70 points ahead of Pecco. Nobody would have written that script, no matter what. So I just think Alex deserves the credit. He is a 2 times world champion, albeit you can't say he was lucky to win Moto2 with Brad chasing. What did Brad chase down? 70 odd points in 4 races, because he has the title. But certainly he's backed up everything. You and I discussed it before round 1, saying Alex, Jack Miller and Frankie Morbidelli need to earn their rides. Well, I think all 3 of them have. And me, I'm quite harsh on Jack. But certainly, technical issues this weekend. But certainly those 3 guys have earned their places to be on the equipment they are on this year. Frankie, we'll discuss. But when he doesn't have brain farts, he's certainly this year is showing the Frankie of 3 seasons ago when he was on the Yamaha. 4 seasons ago.
Yeah. I'll get to the Jack and the other guys a bit later on. I just wanted to confirm, John Kotzer, I get annoyed because, in my opinion, Pecco can't show his true potential, and that's my annoyment, or my frustration, I should say. Frustration in a way as well, is that I do feel there's a better rider there, and he's not able to show it on the bike. I do think a lot of that's getting in the way of him. That is not just the bike, it's also his mindset. I think that's the point I'm trying to get across about Pecco. I believe Pecco will be back once he sorts that out a little bit more. There was a very good comment here. Someone said Alex Marquez will be here. Alex will be Marc's teammate next year. Prove me wrong. Could be not. We can talk about that. But there was another comment here that I wanted to. Andrew, we'll talk about Maverick. We're still going to bring in KTM. We've still got a bit to talk about. Yeah, in Tumeling. Alex takes it a lot easier battling with Marc. Could it be managing family feud? Now, it's a valid point, and it was a discussion brought up on our Facebook page as well, is that some people said, you could see how Alex would pass and battle with Pecco, and then he doesn't seem to have that same fire against Marc. And answering that question honestly, I think it goes back to exactly what I just said now, when Alex puts his hand up and said, but it's Marc. I think Alex knows, well, I'm going to battle with this guy for 3 corners and then or 2 laps, and he's going to be gone. So why waste energy and tire in doing that? Well, I'm going to guarantee myself second place here, because at the moment, for me, that's a win. In the world of Marc Marquez, to be second to Marc Marquez is a win. And that's, in my mind, is what Pecco maybe got wrong. The occasion got the better of him. He was like, you know what, this is my home ground. This is Italy. I'm going to just rough these guys out. You can do that, but you're not playing the end game here, which is just finish on the podium. And it bit him in the arse. Whereas Alex looks at this and goes, and he's said it. He has come out and said it. No one wins head-to-head against Marc. No one. You know, so in Tourmaline, personally, I think Alex looks at this and goes, if there's 4 laps to go and I'm still in the fight, yeah, maybe it's a different story. I'm looking at this early on, and Marc kind of said it, you know, Pecco used a lot of energy and tire to do what he was doing in those first couple of laps. So it put on a show for the crowd and it was great, but it made no sense. It was never going to last. And Alex looks at this and goes, you know, Alex just took advantage. He picked up some of the pieces. When he led the race, it was pieces of what Pecco had led on Marc, you know. Yeah, now I'm leading. Then he gets passed by Marc on the brakes into turn 1, and you think Marc's never going to stop this motorbike. He stops the motorbike and he puts it in. So you as a rider is looking at that. It's happened to me before. You as late on the brakes as you can be, and this guy's come past and you think, okay, this guy's not going to make it. Then the mentality of dealing with this guy's just passed me, then put it in the corner and gone. You're going, okay, well, geez, well, how do I compete with this now?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think Alex is in that mindset. It's not managing a family feud or anything. I just think he knows his place for now. He's getting better and better and better and stronger and more confident and more confident. You know, hopefully one day can put the fight a bit more to Marc. He's done it once or twice this year, but for now, certainly at Mugello this past weekend and at some other races, he goes, what's the point of me wasting my time and energy to be with Marc, which in the end result is going to be the winner, and then I compromise my chances of finishing second? No, thank you. Cheers, Marc. I'll finish second. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that point, Itumeleng, the Marquez brothers are as tight as brothers can be. It's a very, very tight relationship. So I think that they certainly do have a chat amongst each other and say, listen, I'll pass you fair and square, but I'm not going to do anything stupid. I think they've had that discussion. I also wanted to highlight on about lap 3 into turn 1, when the 3 of them were 3 abreast, Pecco got to the front. Alex was a little bit wide, and as he drifted in, Marc just rolled off the throttle, gave him space. If that had been anyone else, I'm telling you now, Marc would have tightened that gap. Because Marc was, I don't know if you noticed it, Rob, Marc was about a quarter of a bike behind Pecco. Alex was on the outside through turn 1.
Yeah.
He blatantly rolls off the gas and makes space for his brother. Now, that to me says 2 things. One, they are brothers and they're good brothers. They're not brothers who don't like each other or okay, they're as tight as can be. But it also says Marc knows. Let Alex also, like Pecco, he can have his 4 or 5 laps in the front, the glory, but as soon as my tires come into their own and I'm comfortable, I'll just drill them. And that's the confidence of a Marc Marquez at the moment. But to me, seeing him roll off there, had that been the opposite way, Bagnaia on the outside, he would have just shut that door and forced Bagnaia to roll off, or Frankie or DJ. That's the respect between the 2 brothers. So part of Itumeleng's question, is he withholding a family feud? Yes, but I agree. He said it. You know, Marc's Marc. Just let him do what he wants, and I'm quite happy in second, which is not a defeatist attitude. I think it's a realist attitude.
For him, it's a huge, for him, it's
absolutely.
Like I said, in the world of Marc Marquez at this power, finishing second to Marc Marquez is a great thing. It was the same as the Rossi days. Finishing second to Rossi was the next best thing, but it's like, hey, I'm the next best winner type thing. So, John asks a question here again, would Alex be even closer to Marc if he was on the same bike? I don't think so, John. I think Marc. So. And then Alex makes a comment here, which is very rude because I'm the host of the show. Rob, sounds like a Suzuki passing a BMW on the last lap, last corner at Red Star. So Alex passed me a few years ago racing. The problem there, Alex, was Suzuki built that bike for you. BMW are not listening to me and didn't build the bike for me. So I'm going to argue that. I didn't have front end feel.
The tire was warm.
No, I just didn't have the front end feel, and my confidence wasn't there because Suzuki built the bike for you. So bugger you. Let's move on to Digi now. Paul found something at the Aragon test. We said after the Aragon, kind of going, okay, Digi, you know, we like what you've done, but you've kind of fallen asleep a little bit now. And this was my biggest argument. I always said to you, Paul, I love Digi and I love the fact you love Digi, but you know, a podium and the win here and it needs to be top 5 kind of week in, week out. Hasn't had that. Had the shoulder injury, started the season, put in some really good rides that I was very impressed with considering, but changed the disc size. Grant Furrows changed the disc size, Rob. I wish I had known that 3 or 4 years ago, whenever that was. But Digi, with this performance, again, talking about the front end feel, which afterwards saying we found a front end feel that Digi likes, and we put it into practice here, and the end result was him on the podium. So hopefully that could be a little click and not just a case of this is the Digi that was inspired, Mugello and beefed up, and then we're going to go to Aston and we're going to have a 7th, 8th plate Digi again.
Yeah, I hope not, Rob. But what does worry me a little bit with him, and he's one of my favorites. Remember, I think it was 4 years, his first year in MotoGP on the Gresini bike, he got pole position here at Mugello. I think we're going back 4 years ago. Out of the blue, I don't think he had been in the top 10, and suddenly he got a pole position. So he certainly is good there. And I do think it's that Italian, that spirit gets you. You know what it's like when you race at Carl Army and there's lots of people there. It definitely does something for you. I hope that isn't what it is for him. And he did say he found something after the Aragon test. So let's hope so. I see he's closed the gap a little bit on his teammate. I was I've been surprised that Morbidelli's been giving him a proper blood nose this year. So it's time that he reverses the favor and not literally, which I think Maverick would have done literally. Yeah, so I hope we'll see. I mean, we don't have to wait long, another 3 more sleepies and we'll know. So hopefully he's genuinely found something. And, he's always been good the last third of a race. So, he needs to maybe just qualify a little bit better. So he's with those front 4 or 5 immediately, not fighting from kind of a 10th place and then working his way forward, which always sounds great. But, you're putting yourself under pressure doing that by not being immediately where Morbidelli, who's had some great starts, is, on lap 1 or 2.
Paul, I'm pleased to say that I'm not going to get chokeslammed by John, because I'm going to agree with what he says here now. This sums up Digi for me. Digi is a top 3 rider in only a few tracks. I don't think he finds something. I think he finds the tracks easy on certain weekends. And that's that's not saying Digi's a bad rider or anything. I just think Digi's got a riding. I know I was like that. I could rock up to PE, the racetrack, and on any bike on any given day and be competitive there. Something worked. Whether there was a mental thing getting to PE, the drive up to PE, what it was, I just always performed there. And there was tracks that I didn't perform. And we've seen it through many racing championships, cars, bikes, when some riders and drivers can switch on at certain places. The difference between the great ones, the Rossis, the Marquezes, the Lorenzos, they can do it week in, week out. Even if like this, Mugello, no, don't worry, it's Pecco's track. Marc's only won there once in 10 years. Marc goes and dominates. That's the difference between those guys and the rest of the field. So Digi has his place in MotoGP. I think he's earned that. I fully agree with that, but I do agree with John's sentiment there. And there's a couple of those riders in the Zarco, before we get into Honda. We said a couple of weeks ago, Zarco does this. He puts in 3 blinding performances, and then he goes to sleep for 3 rounds, and it's not just a case of maybe a little bit, the Honda, but he did it on the Ducati as well. He would be phenomenal, and you'd think, right, this is the Zarco, and then he goes to sleep. So it's, you look at Zarco's performances now. Le Mans, of course, Le Mans was always going to be a great one. He's pumped. He's kind of got that home rubber, and the other tracks he's always performed well at. Then comes these tracks where he hasn't really had much success in before, and the results kind of show it. So that's always going to kind of be my sentiment of Digi until he can go out and finish top 3 in a championship or be in the top 4 every single race weekend. Then I'll change my mind.
And I agree 100% with that sentiment. It's how they get, and we've said it about Digi from 2 years ago when he won. We said he can't do this one weekend a year. Bastianini was exactly the same. We need to, the only one who's changed that this year is Alex Marquez. Even last year, the year before, we said he can't be because I think he won 1 sprint, or he had a couple of podiums last year. You can't do 2 or 3 good races per season and think you're it. And I'm not saying that's their attitude, but the point I'm making, and I think a lot of guys understand, the Marquezes, the Bagnaias, Alex Marquez this year, Jorge Martin last year, and going back in time, you had the obviously Casey Stoner, Rossi, Lorenzo, Dovi, even though they didn't win championships, those 2, they were consistently top 4. They could do it every weekend. Now we need the guys, and Alex has risen to the challenge. I'm not for 1 second not saying that his equipment has helped him possibly more than a Pedro Acosta, Brad Binder, Maverick Vinales, but you can't have the on-off weekends. You need to be every single weekend. So we know that. And that's the difference between an 8 times world champion and a no world champion, is the consistency of doing it week in and week. You're going to have bad weekends. Marcus crashed 3 times. He got a get out of jail free card at Silverstone, but he had actually crashed 3 times in 5 races. He's now realized that. That's another thing that champions can do, that mental fortitude. Okay, I cannot make that mistake again. They know immediately. Where a guy like Johann Zarco, and I'm using him as a bad example, but I think he wins or he has a great race, and then he's kind of, okay, well, I've achieved what I needed to achieve. I'm happy again until he's not happy. Then he picks it up again. Where those top guys are on that, whether it's a high or just the intent. I don't know what it is, Rob, but they can do it week in and week out. So, John, I agree with that sentiment. I just wish Digi would find it more often because he's got it. They all have. They've all shown it. Maverick's another one. Not this year. It's a bad example. But last year and on the Yamaha, when he was good, you didn't come near him. And then suddenly for 5, 6, 7 races, he was nowhere. So it's I think as much as it's an equipment thing, it's that mental fortitude to do it for this year. 22 race weekends. That's half the year. You got to be switched on your A plus game.
Yeah, that's where they earn their money and their status. That's for sure. As Ntumeling says, it was a nice consolation that Digi was on the podium for Rossi and Mugello. It's always a great thing. I want to, while we're on the VR46, let's quickly talk Morbidelli before we talk Maverick, and I don't want to be too much longer because I do want to spend a little bit of time with the kiddies before we go, so I don't want to drag this out. But Frankie, it's got to be spoken about. We've said great rider there, improving, looking fantastic. I've praised him the last couple of weeks, especially after Silverstone, where it was great to see this happy, smiley Frankie who was enjoying his racing. I've never really seen that before. Backed it up at Aragon again, looked happy. Then Frankie goes and does why we call him Loscop. I mean, what was going through that guy's mind? Well, no, just going through his mind. My home track, I'm on a Ducati, you're a Maverick on a KTM, piss off out of my way. But this is where Frankie lets himself down. This is where maybe me and maybe a lot of people can't fully accept the Frankie fan club. Like, oh, I'm going to go buy a shirt. Okay, oh, I'm going to no. He does. He does that. And I suppose the big talking point here now, Paul, is I was interested to see, right, what does race direction do here? What's his penalty going to be? 1 lap. One lap. Then I was, okay, 1 lap for the race. Then he goes and cocks it up and does another one. Rossi, I mean, Uccio afterwards, I could see was kind of biting his tongue in many ways. But, I mean, Rossi must have, Jesus, I would want to murder that out. But I was waiting to see, okay, right, after the race, now, is there going to be, okay, listen, Frankie, this is enough now. Now you've got a penalty going into Assen. Nothing. But for me, I'll have my say. You can have your say. Everyone can have their say. For me, it should have been maybe even a disqualification for that race. Like, enough's enough. You've had enough chances now. This is the 4th or 5th of this season alone. Okay, cool. 1 lap then, or at least after this now, right, you miss Assen. Sorry for you. I know there's contracts and there's, but for me, at some point, you've got to clamp down on these guys.
Yeah, Rob, I don't know when I saw a 1 lap, long lap penalty, I was like, come on. I was expecting a minimum of a ride-through penalty. So maybe he should have got 2 long laps, which ultimately he gave himself. But I think it's time that, and we won't know if this was done, Simon needs to properly haul him over the coals. Not a 1 lap, Frankie, if this happens again, you're out of the next race. And as you say, unfortunately, there are contracts in place, which I think lawyers would be on that immediately and say, but this and that, I don't know. But certainly there needs to be some kind of a more, because that was nothing to him. The fact that he cocked up the second one is why he actually finished worse than what he should have. He would have had a 7th or 6th place finish had he not messed up his first long lap penalty. I think he's got away with too much. It was just blatant what he did. There was no, not even, I mean, you saw on the onboard of Maverick's tipping into that corner, and he knew that there's no ways Maverick was going to stay up. He knows that. He's a racer. He's done it for many years. So very disappointing, I think. The fact that Maverick had passed him, all credit to Maverick, and we're going to obviously talk about him. But Frankie, that's where the professional mentality to just take a step back. So he's passed me. My bike is as fast as his. It probably handles 1% better than his. Let's see where we go for the next lap or two, and then see where the options are. But he doesn't do that. And I understand when you get past, you want to pass back immediately to stamp your authority. But there's a difference between stamping your authority and being an absolute idiot. So I don't know. I do think he's skating on thin ice in terms of race direction, and if he gets in someone's way on the qualifying lap, which he does quite frequently, or he does something stupid, I do think his next penalty is going to be very severe. Whatever that is, I don't know, but it's certainly not going to be a ride through. I think it might, if it's not a start from the back of the grid, no matter where you qualify, it will be a race suspension. So he's going to have to tidy up his act. And the fact that he goes straight away afterwards and apologizes to Maverick, all credit to him, but that's too late. You've done the dirty. There's nothing Maverick can't get back up and say, okay, well, let's put me back where I was, and off we go. It doesn't work like that. So, in hindsight, it was a stupid thing. I don't know. But I think he's really skating on thin ice.
I think the bigger picture problem is you're at your home race, you're the Italian, you're Rossi, your boss is there. It's a time to shine and act responsible and act professional. We've got a Pedro Acosta potentially waiting in the wings, and then you go and do that. If I was a Rossi, I'd look at that and go, I know you're part of the VR46 camp and we love you and whatever, but you've really kicked me in the face here. You've really let us down here. You could have easily been on that podium. We're lucky we got Digi on the podium. Great. Yeah. But we really could have been there, guaranteed, had you just done what you've done the last couple of weeks, but then you go and do this stupid thing again. And this is not the first time. So if looking at it like that, you think, oh, Frankie's safe. He must be safe. You're going to look at it and go, well, you go and pull a stupid thing like that in with Pedro Acosta and other riders waiting. Maybe he's not. So anyway, it was disappointing. I'm not going to go too much on about Yamaha and Honda. I think, it's there for everyone to see. Yamaha were very disappointing. I mean, for Miguel Oliveira to be the top Yamaha in 26 seconds off, and people to be raving about Oliveira, he's back. It's not enough for me. But let's focus on KTM a bit. Maverick is still the one showing this pace that KTM have. It's there. Maverick's not always put it together with, I think, the mental side. If he doesn't get a good start, he struggles to pass and whatever. He was on the pace from the word go, got a good start, was showing his pace. Someone commented earlier, never mind DG finish on the podium. There's no doubt that Maverick could have potentially been on the podium, or at least fourth and pushed Pecco back to fifth. But showing the potential of the KTM that Pedro and Brad and certainly Bastianini can't seem to get. Brad was also off this weekend. I loved how positive he was again, and we found something. And, he came out of the weekend saying, we found something. We went in a direction that I love. Bring on Assen. And I'm hoping that's true. The sprint race was a complete disaster. DG racing incident. I fully agree with that. It was just Mugello turn one. It's going to happen. But there is this frustrating factor that Viñales is more consistently able to show a better pace on the KTM compared to Pedro and Brad, especially, who have to really dig deep and struggle to find it. It's a continuous conversation.
It is, Rob, and what worries me is that, we've always said it about Maverick. He's a class act, but he's not a class act very often. But this year, he's been a class act since Qatar. I don't think he did too great in the first couple of races, but from Qatar, he seems to have found something. And is he making the bike look good, or is the bike that good and they're gelling? So that's the catch-22. I'm going to go with the former and say he's making the bike look good, because if nothing else, whether you like it or not, I do think Pedro has a couple of tenths on Brad at the moment. Pedro's struggling. He's not, he can do that one flying lap and get it straight into Q2 and then, hover around 7, 8, 9. But Maverick looks good all the time now. He just seems to have, whether it's a base setting that he's comfortable with, or this whole package is just gelled with him. He's making that bike look good. And I do think he's making it look better than what it is, because of the fact that Brad and Pedro are always very similar in where they are. Never mind Bastianini. He's been struggling the whole season. One thing that I had a real issue with, and tell me if I'm wrong, Brad spent the last 6 minutes of Q1 in the pits. But then I heard that he had crashed, but they didn't show that. Or did I just not see it? I didn't see it on TV, Rob. So I was wondering why he didn't go out. Then that made sense. But surely, did they not plan for it? So his bike wasn't ready, because we saw again, you cannot go through to from Q1 to Q2 and then expect a good result. It just seems like it doesn't happen. So I don't know if that was the downfall of Brad for the weekend. The sprint race, just one of those things. But in the race, he was good. He had a good dice with Pedro, but they just not making the bike do what Maverick is able to make it do. And he's making it look relatively easy.
Yeah, as Lisa Espen says, they didn't show Brad's crash, and I also had that same thing. And then I realized, as they put a soft tire for Brad to go on a time attack, he crashed, and then just obviously a point of the track where he couldn't get back and go again. So that ruined his qualifying. One thing I will say about Brad's qualifying, if I was him, I would start just whatever Alex Rins does in the practice session, just do what Alex does, because Alex Rins somehow finds himself in Q2 more often, because he follows 100%. Someone, and so Brad just follow Alex. Whatever Alex Rins does in that second practice session, just do what he does. I do think it's a case of, and Brad's proven it, when Brad's in Q2, it's a different story. He did a great job coming from 15th or wherever he qualified to be racing with Pedro. Great. Paul, I looked at it this weekend, and I still see a Pedro Acosta who, when he wants to be fast, watch everyone, you as well. I really watched it this weekend. When Pedro's got a grippy tire and feeling on the bike, those brake and tight turning lines aren't as evident. He brakes, he turns in a bit later and takes more of the correct line, we should say, the more of the fast racing line, the Maverick line. Whereas as soon as the tire start and the feeling starts going away from him, that braking and middle of the track and turning in earlier seems to be a reaction to, okay, shit, this bike's not feeling great. I've got to do this now to get the bike in the corner. Most of the time it pays off, and then there's times like this weekend where it doesn't. You tuck the front coat, you tuck the front and. But it definitely seems to be a progression with Pedro. As soon as the bike starts getting more chatter or the feeling starts going away, he turns in a bit earlier. Maverick seems to have the best of both worlds in terms of Brad's assets, in that, braking late, getting the bike in on the right line and getting it up and square down. And then Pedro's, again, being able to carry the speed mid-turn and get it out. So he's got a bit of both of those riding styles, and he's just able to put it together and make it work. I think it's a case of, like Zarco on the Honda, where Maverick's just able to, whether it's a mental or just a feeling, just deal with the vibration and what's happening and trust it and ride past it to go faster, whereas Brad and Pedro are hampered by it. And I don't want to say slow down, but certainly react more to it. It just looked, I really took note this weekend of Pedro. At one stage, it was in the qualifying, they were following him, and I was like, geez, this guy's not turning in early. Then literally, I think his next flying lap, I was like, okay, this guy's turning in early again. And that must be a reaction to how the bike's feeling. Brad, in points, looked better on the bike. Certainly the fast, like coming onto the straight, Brad's a machine. There was the part in the race where Pedro was on Brad, and you could see almost in the change of direction in some of the braking sectors, Pedro was right on Brad. And then Brad through that corner. It's those corners where Brad can go in, let go with the brake and flow with the bike and get on the gas that Brad seems to really like gel. It's the corners where you've got to brake, somehow get the bike stopped in the middle of the turn to be able to calm it down, hit that apex and go, that Brad seems to struggle. That last turn at Mugello, there's like 5 different lines and you can take this. So there's no real, if you don't hit the apex, you're fucked. So you're buggered type thing. Brad in that corner could kind of just use his assets and carry the speed. So again, those onboards with Pedro highlighted where Brad's weaknesses are and he doesn't feel comfortable with the bike, and where Pedro's weaknesses are and where he's comfortable with the bike. And Maverick's just able to bring both those worlds together and put it together more often than not.
Yeah, I just think Maverick looks super smooth. They don't show a hell of a lot of slow-mos from Maverick's bike, but one thing, so I think he's very smooth at the moment. One thing I noticed with Brad, specifically turn 15 onto the straight, once he's let the brake off and he's selected his line, he was pinpoint accurate. He stayed probably a meter off the curb, where some of the guys run it a little bit wide and then bring it back in and then drift wide. Brad kind of stayed in the middle of that turn. And that's where you could see us pulling a gap on Pedro when they showed the onboard. Yes, I also understand the second rider doesn't get on the gas at the same time. But Brad just looked rock steady. I think you're quite right, Rob. The fast flowing stuff, which Assen's got a lot of that this coming weekend. That's definitely more into Brad's liking than the stop, brake as hard as you can, and then possibly as they're turning it in, that's where he's getting that vibration and chatter, because now the front tire is starting to sort of compress and decompress as they're going into the turn, more so than possibly the Ducatis are doing. But definitely, I think Brad looked okay, but Maverick is really, he's gelled with this bike, there's no doubt. And to be quite honest, I thought out of the four of them this year, he was going to be the one who had struggled the most, but he certainly proved that that's not the case.
Yeah, Lisa Esmond with some good information. Yeah, Brad and Pedro were on hard fronts and Maverick was on a medium.
Yeah,
I understand that, but Maverick's able to have the feeling with a medium and make it work. Whereas, the hard seems to be the go-to choice for Brad and Pedro, because that's the best tire. That, not necessarily the best tire they can get the feeling. Obviously, they get a better feeling with the soft. They know it's not going to last, but that's the compromise they have to make. But Maverick just looked faster, even when they were on mediums or soft and soft, putting in a faster lap time. Maverick just looked comfier, because I think he just blends both those riding styles and is able to put it together, whereas Brad and Pedro are good at this with the bike, but suffer with this on the bike.
But also, sorry, does Maverick not get away with running the medium because he's smoother? So he's not as aggressive into the turn, which Brad, we know, he likes the hard tire because it doesn't, he can hit the brakes hard and allow the tire to compress. And then he's got the grip that he needs, where with the medium, possibly it squashes the tire too much. So it becomes too tacky. Maybe because Maverick is a little bit smoother, but also it would be interesting to know the thinking behind only Pedro and Brad going for the hard, everybody else on the medium, so it would be interesting to know the thinking behind that.
Yeah, I think it is feeling and riding style. As you said, I think Brad and Pedro are very front end. Also, we don't know, Maverick was taken out early. He could have completely faded with that medium front, which is why, Brad and Pedro went with the hard, because they knew there was going to be a drop. So we don't know that. But like I said, even when they were on qualifying setup, Maverick looked better and has in many times this season. Brad, I don't know, if you just got to get to a point where he's just got to throw soft tires to get himself into Q2 and then deal with the weekend after that. But that you said it time and time again, that's his biggest handicap. There was a comment here that I wanted to answer. Wade, the telemetry, they share the telemetry. One thing Brad did say at Silverstone was, people kept saying to him, Maverick's proved you've got to ride the bike smoothly, and are you looking at, and I think Brad played that game for a while, and at Silverstone, Brad had and KTM had an absolute nightmare, and Brad kind of went, I've got to start doing my own thing. I've got to stop trying to compare my data with this oak and ride the bike this way and this way. Even Brad this year started to do the leg out thing and stuff. So he's tried a lot of different things, and I think it's exactly what I'm talking about with Pecco. You overanalyze and you overthink things instead of just going, I'm a ridiculously fast rider. I'm going to go. I don't think Brad has that luxury because the bike's not there at the moment. I think it could be better, if he owned all that in, but certainly he's not going to, make that change and then he's going to be racing against Marquez. The KTM's not there to do that. So I do think there's a compromise from both sides. I think Brad's got some trust my ability. I've got to just ride this thing the way I like to do it. And there's a compromise more so on the side of KTM, where they've just got to, they still, Paul, I still saw this weekend where there's new Stegosaurus wings. And one session Pedro was out with him and then he wasn't. And then Brad was out with him and then he wasn't. And then there's still that argument with KTM.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't seem like Maverick does as much of that. Or I don't know if we just don't hear it as much. If he's trying as much, he seems to stick with a bit more of a setting, or they found a base setting which they kind of take from race to race, whereas The others seem to do that. That's, what it seems like from the outside. That's the frustration. We don't know, but certainly, from Silverstone, I got the impression that Brad was like, you know what, bugger this, I want to start doing things my way. And I think that is the way to go. Bruno in a couple of weeks' time is going to be a good yardstick. We haven't been there. The last time we were there, correct me if I'm wrong, is when Brad won all those years ago in 2020 or whatever. It hasn't been on the calendar. So that's going to be another good yardstick of where KTM maybe are. Aragon showed glimpses, but that was more, we discussed it, failing of the others that promoted KTM up as the second best manufacturer in that round. They were pushed back slightly here, although they weren't actually terrible.
No, absolutely.
They destroyed the Yamahas. The Aprilias were a little bit better, but Brad and Pedro, I like the fact, well, I didn't like the fact, but it was confidence inspiring that Brad was with Pedro. There's been races this year where Pedro's been, a little bit further up the road, and that the fact that they're together highlights that, okay, there's talented riders here. The bike's the problem. As I said, the Maverick exercise looked like it was going to be fantastic. We don't know if that could have ended horribly with tire fade or whatever. We'll never know. But I think overall, the finger's still being pointed at KTM. The package is still not there. And going back to the earlier question that we have, could the switch to Pirellis be that answer? And could the aeros off and everything be the answer? Maybe so. Are KTM going to hang around for us to see that? We don't know.
Yeah, listen, all we can hope is that our Boykie starts finding more and more that what he needs to do to put this thing closer to the front. And we've said it how many times, Rob? Going directly into Q2 has become vital. It's not just important; it's vital. I don't know if you heard the commentary we get. Luca Marini was in the commentary booth for Friday afternoon session, and he was saying how important that is to make sure he said that never mind you saving possibly 2 soft front tires by doing that, or 2 tires for Q2, and possibly for a race, if there's a red flag, you've got another tire you can swap to immediately. But he said the pressure, and this was from Luca Marini, who you have said is such an analytical guy.
Yes.
He said, you cannot understand how much relief you feel by making it directly into Q2. Yeah. And this was from him. So now we can't fathom, and you think, but it's only another 15 minutes. It's the pressure, because now only 2 of you go through. There's always, in Q1, there's always 6 guys guaranteed that are on the cusp. So you've got to put in, you can't crash. You got to, because your best bike needs to go through to Q2 with you. It's just immense. And he was saying, you don't, because they asked him, they said, now you know what it's like. What is it like? And he said, it's unreal. That's why there's so much pressure put on these guys to get directly into Q2, which we've said, something Brad needs to, I'm not going to say sort out. I think they need to, like you say, do what Rins has been doing. I mean, Rins finishes second last, one behind Lucas Savadori, but he gets into Q2. Shouldn't be happening. So do what he's doing. Marc used to do it on the Honda. It works. Just try it. We saw it 2 weeks ago. Brad did it and it worked. So, come on, Boykie.
Yeah, I think the crash really upset the apple cart in that car. When he went out, there were a couple of times I saw he was riding a pack with that idea of following someone, and it just didn't click off with crashes or whatever. So, it's a pity that happened, but let's wait and see what happens there. Paul, I want to end the show off with a little bit of rumor. We know the Jorge Martin thing. I watched a video of Jorge Lorenzo, who put it in perfectly. They asked him about the Martin thing, and he said, I was a rider. I was in that situation. I know exactly what's happened. Martin's only said this with his Aprilia contract because he's got another contract in the bag. And he's absolutely right. Lorenzo got it spot on. He said, that guy's manager is not stupid. I think it's the same manager that Lorenzo actually had or something. He says, I know that he's not stupid. He would have signed the Aprilia deal with a backup plan. That backup plan being Honda. Him and Honda have already had the discussion. Right. Halfway through the year comes with that clause, you're not happy, you've already signed for Honda. How can a rider like Jorge Martin have the confidence to say, cheers, Aprilia, I don't trust it, I'm out of here, without knowing that he doesn't have a backup plan already? So Lorenzo's sentiments were very much like, he already had this Honda deal signed when he signed for Aprilia. He knew, like, I'll give this Aprilia thing 6 months. I'll give it a little shot, and if it's not good, I'm going for the money and the factory that is Honda. So that deal looks like it's done. And when I watched that, I was like, okay, this is cast in stone. Jorge Martin will be on a Honda. We've heard rumors, and maybe after I watched that Lorenzo thing, that was cast in stone. So that's the first thing. The second thing that's a big surprise to me is Jack Miller and Cal Crutchlow, Honda World Superbikes. Now, from a Cal Crutchlow side, I looked at it and went, geez, Cal, do you really want to, he's just come off an injury that he missed half of Yamaha's testing. And do you want to, it's not as rigorous as MotoGP, I know, but do you want to throw yourself in that exercise? And, I think Honda looking at it is right. We'll have a Jack to go for podiums and race wins and a Cal to develop the bike on race weekends. Okay, it's a good idea. I looked at Miller, and I know I bring this up because a couple of, earlier in the show, you said Miller's kind of proved himself. And in many ways, I think he has. I look at this and I go, you know what, Jack, do it. Go to World Superbikes, my bad. You've done the MotoGP thing. No disrespect to Jack. Now he could go sign a Ducati, a factory Ducati ride in MotoGP next year, and he would have better results, but he still wouldn't go and win and be on Marc or Pecco's level or any of those guys. So I think Jack's exercising MotoGP is done. I think do your work with Yamaha now. Cool. You can leave MotoGP with your head held high and go, you know what, I had a great run there. But let's go give World Superbikes a go. I think his attitude would fit there. I think he would pick up World Superbikes. I think he would be a big asset to Honda. So I know he wants to probably hold on to MotoGP. But if he stays with Pramac another season next year, Paul, realistically, and you know how much I love Jack. I want to see him, but I want to see him there competing. I don't want to see him sign again with Pramac, and Pramac then potentially miss out on a Manuel Gonzalez or another rider that they've made the right decision in Top Rack. Great, love it, well done.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean, Jack, you've done it. I don't want to, with all due respect, I don't want to see a Jack or Miguel re-sign for Pramac, and then next year it's the same thing. The odd weekend where it's a really good performance, and then make the change, and let's see a Manuel Gonzalez has got to go somewhere. He's got to.
Yeah.
He has to.
Yeah.
Even a Joan Mir's got to go somewhere. A Luca Marini's got to go somewhere. The somewheres are starting to look more prominent now that these rumors come about. I think Jack to World Superbikes is a winner.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Why Cal Crutchlow would want to do that? I think what you're saying then is their development rider. Does he need the money, Rob? I'm going to presume no. Injury-wise, he's come off a couple of big injuries. How old Cal now? He must be late 30s. I can't see that. Jack, as much as I say he's earned his ride this year, I'm not saying he should keep it for next year.
Yeah.
Him, Miguel Oliveira, Raul Fernandez, if I could pick three to move on, those would be my three without a question, regardless of what Raul Fernandez does going forward for the rest of the year. He's had too many opportunities. Going back to Martin and what Lorenzo said, I would love to have seen that. I haven't seen it.
I'll try to find it, yeah.
I just saw that comment that someone said now that Martin never wanted to go to Aprilia. Yeah. But Aprilia picked him out of a terribly tight spot. He probably wouldn't have had a ride for this year. Well, he hasn't had a ride, but that was his own doing. Where would he have ended up if he didn't sign for Aprilia? That's the question. And I go back to Dovi. Dovi took a year off, could never get back to where he was. 1 year in MotoGP is critical. But anyway, if he's done that, I think it's very underhanded. If he had the Honda contract kind of in his pocket and Aprilia were a fill-in, well, I'm going to have both sides of my cake and eat both sides.
Yeah.
So I think a bit underhanded. I think, and obviously we don't know the nuts and bolts. I think he's been offsides to Aprilia.
Yes,
but he had a clause in his contract and he said they discussed it and that's all that's happened. And he wanted to enforce the clause that give me 6 races and then we decide. And Aprilia said, no, you need to decide now. That's what he says. With it, where was it? It was 2 races ago, 6 races in. So I don't know. I think it's a difficult one. Is he going to be on a factory Honda? Marini says talks with him and Honda are going fantastically. So, does that mean Mir's out? Mir, Pramac, Yamaha with Top Rack. Now, that would be possibly a good combination. So, anyway, lots of rumors, lots of conjecture. I just think Martin, to me, it smacks of being a bit underhanded. All his dealings. I'm not for 1 second saying that's what it is. He just, to sneak into Le Mans and make the statement and, that's just my opinion. I hope I'm wrong. But it seems like, and Lorenzo would know, because as you say, the riders know the ins and outs. So yeah, it sounds like that's the thing. And to be quite honest, you know me, Rob, I'm a Honda guy. I don't know if I want to see him on a Honda.
Yeah.
Personal opinion. He's not my favorite guy. I just think he whines when things don't go his way, where other riders, just like a Pecco, they try and improve their situation. Like a Brad, they try and improve their situation. And maybe it's good to have a rant and a rave, but he just seems to, when it doesn't go his way, it's everybody else's fault, a la Maverick Vinales. So I don't know. Let's see how that plays out.
Yeah, it doesn't seem a good fit to me at all. The Martin, the personality with Honda and how the Japanese like to work, and Alessio Spargro's probably had that's another big conversation we can have. Yeah. Scott Mordaunt, I completely agree with you, man. I miss Lorenzo, had the personality of a doorknob, but I eventually supported him. I watched the best races of Mugello, as they always do in the lead up to race weekends, and Lorenzo was just, man, the guy was so good. When you watch him in those dominant years, at Mugello, he dominated on the Yamaha when he won on that Ducati. The guy was so good. Ollie Moten and a couple of other guys saying the rumor is that Crutcher will be team manager, not rider for Honda. So
that could be a good thing.
That's interesting. Sean Portman, my brother, update from Bowie on Richer just now. Today we can confirm that Richer Moodley has been released from hospital in Florence, where he was admitted after his crash in Mugello. Richer had several fractures that had to be carefully managed to determine the extent of the injuries. Thankfully, all the tests were good, and he will now continue his healing process in Barcelona. We hope that he can recover as fast as possible. To have him back with us, we would like to thank you all for the support. Net. So that's good news for Richer. Nothing critical or serious, which is fantastic. I'm going to answer this question as well to end the show off. The Great 481, what's your take on a lot of journalists and people in MotoGP completely writing Toprak off? I don't agree. I think as soon as you get Toprak comfortable on that bike, listening to the journalists that I've spoken to that tested Toprak's World Superbike BMW, they said it's like a race bike they've never ridden in their life. It's like a cruiser. Sit in the bike, the bars, it's the weirdest race attack position they've ever witnessed in their life. And you can see Toprak, how he sits on that bike. I look at Toprak's riding style and I compare it to how, I spoke earlier about Marc's. None of this hanging off the thing, more comfortable on the bike and more direct, I think once Toprak is comfortable in MotoGP, he will be competitive. I'm not saying he's going to go destroy everyone and whatever, but I certainly don't think he's going to be as the Great 41-8 says, where some people are just saying, nah, he's not. He's going to struggle with the tires and the tracks and whatever. Get him comfortable on that Yamaha in terms of, and he still said it in the one interview. What's the if you could tell Yamaha now what you would like the most, and he said bike position. Just listen to me and get me comfortable on that bike. Seating position, whatever it is, get me comfortable on that bike. I can take it from there. So 481, I think everyone's got it wrong. I think he's going to do fantastic things. There. Did you guys hear the rumor of Miguel from Pramac to KTM and Anaya back to Pramac? Grant, I have heard Anaya back to Pramac, but Miguel to KTM.
Miguel, yeah.
Oh, what? Please, no.
Yeah, Miguel must move on now.
Yeah, no, Miguel must also. I think the family, the two kids. I think this whole MotoGP thing is a bit too much. Go to World Superbike, enjoy your racing again, and bring on the results. Bring on Toprak. Only Marc has more natural talent than him on the grid in the world right now, Ollie Moto. Tim Jordan, Rob, where can we find you at ABR to come and say how's it? Tim, please, the Zero Motorcycle stand. So where all the exhibitors are, just walk down. I think we're next to Cove and someone else. But please come to the stand and say how's it. That'll be absolutely amazing. Johan Toprak is like Marc, rides past or through the bike issues. You see now, John, we're agreeing. No, we don't have to arm wrestle. I don't have to throw you in the world of arm wrestling. Okay, the rest is pretty much stuff we can carry on next time. So, Paul, everyone, thank you so much. I'm going to go quickly jump into bed with my little babies and spend some time with them before I go. But it's been an absolute pleasure, as always, Paul. I'm glad you look fantastic in the cap. And hang on, everybody. I must give a huge congratulations to Paul because James then told me about this. Forget Marc Marquez winning on a bicycle at Le Mans. Who's Marc Marquez? Because in the world of bicycle racing, there's only one name, and that's Paul Scott. Paul, you must tell me when you win these big races. I don't want to hear it from James Dent. I want you to come on the show, and I want you to brag about it. Tell us.
Rob, I'm embarrassed to say I won a race and I'm 60 years old.
No, you're embarrassed. I'm happy when I got Clubman of the Year trophy and I'm playing football and I'm 43. No,
It's the
Paul,
same thing. Eh? It's exactly this.
No. James knows his cycling and James knows his stuff. And he says, for you to win that race, it was a big one. So don't hold yourself back here.
Okay, well, I'm going to miss the sprint on Saturday because I'm racing again. So I'll keep you
Listen to me
posted.
now. Marquez has just WhatsApped me and said, please get a signed cap from Paul. Yeah.
Tell him it's a done deal. I'll get it to him somehow.
John, what shop do you have in the UK, Rob? John, I don't have a shop. I work for Zero Motorcycles Europe, but I'm based in the UK. So hopefully I get to see you around some bike events or something sometime. So again, yeah, Paul, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you so much. Don't have to wait long. It's Essen this weekend. Sure. I'm working, so I'll have to watch it afterwards, but we'll certainly have a good chat about it on Tuesday. So have a great week, everyone, and can't wait to do this again next week, Tuesday.
Yeah, Rob and everyone who tuned in, thanks again, once again. I can't believe 2 hours. We've got another 2 hours in our pocket if we need it. But yeah, thank you very much. That was awesome. To everyone who tuned in, have a good evening, and we'll chat next week, Tuesday.
Cheers.
Good, man. Cheers.